Gme Admin Insights, the podcast dedicated to the Gme community. I'm your host, Natasha Brox, and I am thrilled to be back with you today. As always, I always like to talk about growth within GME, whether it's professional growth, professional development. And I like to have people on the podcast that brings the insight and meaningful information to the GME community. And with that, today's guest that I have for you is Angely Martinez. Let's see, Angely began her GME journey in 2016, leading the legal industry and going into the healthcare administration. She joined Weill Cornell Medicine Pulmonary and Critical Care Medicine team and supported faculty affairs and their ACGME accredited fellowship programs. And during her time at Yale, she enrolled in UConn School of Business, where she earned her MBA and is a notary, Tag Me certified. And now she is the medical education manager at Harvard Healthcare, where she leads the medical education department. And one of her goals in the next year is to go back to her motherland, which is the Dominican Republic, which I've never been. I want to go.
You should go.
Yes. And you haven't been there in 16 years, but
Too long.
I have a lot of friends who went to the DR, or they went and they loved it and they moved there. So
they moved there. Oh, wow. Good for that.
Yeah, they moved there, and they've been there for, I want to say, maybe 7 years now. So
wow,
yeah, they loved it. So, and then I have friends who just go all the time. So I want to make that trip as well.
Good, you should.
So,
yeah, let me know.
Yeah. So welcome to
Gme
Admin Insights. I am so glad that you are here with me today.
I'm excited.
Yay.
Yes, I know, I'm excited too. Thank you for having me.
Oh, yes. So, I always wanted to meet you. I wanted to collaborate with you because I know, like, we've talked on LinkedIn and we spoke about, information, and we just, went back and forth, which, I'm like, okay, well, I need to put this out there for the GME community, right? So thank you for being here. And let's get right into it. So you've been in the legal industry and now you're in the healthcare. You're like the second person that I've known that went from legal into healthcare. So so how did you make that leap, and why?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a little bit of context. So my undergrad is in political science. So I think for those of us who were political science majors or poli-sci majors, as we like to say, normally the law career path is what we are pushed into, if you will. And I was most certainly interested in becoming an attorney. That's why I was a paralegal for a few years, a legal assistant. I worked directly with judges for quite some time. And in 2014, I was living in Utah. Believe it or not, it's like a story for another day, but I was living in Utah for 3 years. And at the job I was at, I maxed out all of my promotions. And so I was thinking to myself, well, I have a couple of options. I can go to law school now. And I'll be honest, I know myself, I wasn't ready for law school at that time. I really wasn't. So I said, okay, that's not going to work. So let me just move out of state because I'm not originally from Utah, right? So I said, let me move back east. And I was trying to move to Washington, D.C., the DMV area specifically. And I'm like, let me try my luck because that's where I wanted to practice law. So it just makes sense. And I couldn't find a job. So I couldn't find a job. That was just me being honest. I couldn't find a job at all. I tried everything, my networks, nothing was happening. And I had to move back home to Connecticut. And if you know anything about me, I hate Connecticut. I did not like growing up in Connecticut. So the fact that I was moving back, I was distraught. So at that point, if you could imagine, I'm like, your girl have bills to pay.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I have to survive. So I said, you know what? I spoke with a few family members and friends who were in healthcare. And they were more on the back end of healthcare, right? They weren't necessarily patient facing. And I was asking them about their careers, etc. And what was running through my mind during that time was something my mentor, who was an attorney, he had shared with me was school, law school, grad school, undergrad, doesn't matter, is always going to be there. You're young, you don't have any like huge responsibilities, you don't have any children right now, etc. Be free, explore. This is your time to do that. Explore different careers. Why not? If I could do it all over again, I would do the same thing. I said, you know what? You're right. So that's what I did. I took a risk. So through some networking with, like I said, family members and friends, I started off as a front desk a coordinator, I guess, in a private medical practice. I did that for about like a year and a half, I believe. And then I had a cousin who worked at Weill Cornell, and she had moved to another department, but she was still friendly with the former department that she used to work at. They really liked her. And she had mentioned or put a good word in for me, like, oh, by the way, I have a great cousin. If you like me, you'll love her. And so there was one opening at that time. So I applied for the administrative assistant role. And because I was just, just trying to get my foot in. And then the administrator, I'm not sure if she's still there anymore, but the administrator at that time, she had mentioned, I like the fact that you have a legal background. You have a great, you write really beautifully. You're very good at editing, all these things. There might be an opportunity later, but it's not open right now. If you're willing to wait, I'll let you know when it's open. I said, you know what? Sure. Like, I'm taking risk at this point. Sure. Don't care. Yeah. So I waited, and that's when the position opened for the to support faculty affairs as well as the GME program. That's how it came up. And so I applied for it. I went through several interviews. I think if I counted, like 10 interviews, right? But as you can see, in my opinion, it was well worth it because I was able to dive right into the GME world. I fell in love with it. And I also understood how faculty affairs operated and how closely related they are. So I really feel like it was definitely, if you will, like a blessing in disguise that I learned both at the same time. Because later down the line, believe it or not, it became an important part of my career growth. The fact that I knew both. Yeah, so, and I was able to multitask in that way and think and shift my thinking the way that I did. So yeah, that's how I landed in healthcare, if you will, and I haven't left since.
Now, are you glad you made that leap of faith?
That's
Because
a great
many people
question. I
don't.
know. I'm not gonna lie, and I know other coordinators and administrators that I've spoken with know that I'll say this, and I'm honest. It has been a bumpy road. I'm not going to lie about that. But am I grateful that I did what I did and took that risk? Yes, because I feel that the way that I grew both personally and professionally, the people that I met along the way, the problems I was able to solve, the impact I was able to make, or also the impact that changed my life in positive ways. I don't know if I would have received that in other like roles necessarily. And for me, like just being a part of the growth and resilience of our, future physicians, to me makes me feel like I'm valued in some way, because I'm more on the back end. But yeah, I don't regret it. I'm glad I did
Right.
it.
Just taking you through different stages, and then
Mhm.
networking. Like your network,
Yeah.
even though it
Mhm.
had to be a family member, it's still key.
Yeah.
Even though
Yeah.
it can help you or take you where you wanted to go in your legal field,
Mhm.
you still had that networking in the
Mhm.
medical field, and you were
Yeah.
able to use it. Oh,
Mhm.
I love that.
Yeah. Oh, me too. Yeah, I feel like networking, and just fun fact about me, I was not always good at it. I'm naturally I grew up pretty shy and reserved and
Mhm.
observant. I wasn't always good at like social situations growing up
Mhm.
for several reasons. I think one of them was my ability to speak English because English is not my first language. So that was part of it.
Okay,
And being, growing up where I grew up, there wasn't a lot of me out there, so it wasn't
that's true.
super diverse. So I think over time I gained confidence, in introducing myself and speaking with people and And also, luckily, I have many family members who are in different careers, not just in healthcare, and several different types of careers. And I think they helped me to just like feel comfortable asking questions. Because at the very least, I might be shy naturally,
Mhm.
but I ask a lot of questions. I'm very curious,
Right,
right? So I feel like that can sort of start a conversation already, just asking a million questions. That
right.
sort of helps
That's
me
true.
to a degree. Yeah. So yeah, but I
That's
agree. Networking is great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I would say networking is key.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was an introvert too. Nobody would believe me, but I was. So I
Yeah.
understand when you talk about the reserve, not really
Yeah.
speaking or whatever, and you do have to
Mhm.
just break yourself from that.
Yeah. Mhm.
But look at you now, like, wow,
Yeah.
all you've
Yeah.
grown. I
Yeah.
mean, just doing
Yeah.
a lot. I like that. I like that.
Mhm.
So doing this whole, going into from legal to medical,
Mhm.
I know you said something about you fell in love with ACGME. So what
Yeah.
specifically ACGME, like what made you,
Mhm.
when you were at ACGME, what
Mhm.
was it that sparked you to be like, you know what, I like GME now?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think it was 2 situations, I think. So my first ECGME conference, it was at Rosen, right? And so, I like, speaking of networking, I
Mhm,
like the collegiality
mhm,
of it. I met so many people during that trip. Some that like we're still friendly on Instagram or LinkedIn. We bump into each other sometimes during conferences. And just everyone at the time, at least, everyone's willingness to like teach each other and learn from each other and help each other out. I really like that because I that's part of the reason why I love my job, my last job in Utah. I was working for a judicial team. We supported judges for juvenile court judges. And
mhm,
so the way that we succeeded as a team was that collaboration and learning from each other. And I noticed I really like that. I was always like a solo person for the most part. Most of my jobs have always been just me. And so just being in that team environment, I'm like, oh, I like this about ACGME and GME in general.
mhm,
Um, then the other part was ACGME at that time had, I'm gonna say, a workshop at their headquarters that they offered to new coordinators who wanted to learn more about accreditation within their specialty. So mine was internal medicine, even though I was pulmonary and critical care medicine specifically. But um, so when I attended, we learned from a lot of people and their experiences. And also, I like the puzzle pieces that I put together in ACGME. It triggers my intellectual curiosity in a way that not many things can.
mhm,
And so during that trip, I said to myself, I love this, like, I like this for my type of thinking, my type of learning, what I consider to be my strengths in general. It sort of taps into the different things that I like. It mixes a little bit of legal, a little bit of HR,
mhm.
a little bit of customer service, a
So
little bit of
true.
this and the third, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I feel like for me, especially for me, I'm a little scatterbrained. I could admit that, right? So to keep me focused, I like to wear many hats. So like just kind of keeping me busy in that way, it speaks to my strengths. And so I sort of used those 2 experiences to develop, or I guess to figure out what I wanted to eventually study. That's
Mhm,
how I ended up getting my MBA and a couple other things, right? Because I thought I want to tap into like the things that really spark my interest when it comes to ACG and me. And I like the intersectionality between like business and management, HR
yeah,
and all these things. I like that, and
mhm.
I geek out about it. I can talk about it, as you can tell, probably all day long.
I could
But
too.
I don't, I'll spare you, but yeah.
I could too,
So
though. GME, ACGME, like all of that, all the policies, procedures, all the,
mhm.
whatnots, I could too. I could talk
Yeah,
about it. I could do research on it. I
yes.
could. So I
Mhm.
know exactly what you're saying. I think that's why I'm always doing something because I'm like,
Mhm.
well, I wonder about this. And then I go and I look into it, I
Yep.
research and I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Then I put it out there.
Mhm.
I wonder, well, they have that for residents and doctors, but we need this for,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
I
I'm the same
believe,
way.
I
It's
understand completely what you're
it
saying.
almost feels like the possibilities are endless. Like, that's how it
Yes.
feels like to me every day when I come into work. Like, And maybe for some, that might be the part of the job that they don't like, which
Yeah.
which is okay, right? But for me, I thrive in that type of environment
Mhm.
where there's a new thing or a new fire to put out or a
Mhm.
new problem to solve or a new thing to discover or implement. I'm like, sign me up. I'm
Isn't
here.
that crazy though?
Yeah.
It's just so crazy. It's like, how could
Mhm.
I know people be like, like a lot of my
Mhm.
friends are like, how do you do that? Like, I can't, that's just too, clutter for
Yeah.
me. I just can't. I'm like, no, I can see it
No.
straight through. That's
Yeah.
that, that's that, this is that. And it
Mhm.
could be like a whole whirlwind of things.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's easy for me. It's
Mhm.
so yeah, I love it. I love it.
Oh, good.
I
Yeah.
love the craziness of it all.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah, I like that. Even though I complain sometimes, but I do like the craziness, so
Yeah,
it's
I
fine.
know. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
So would you ever go back to legal though?
Funny you should ask because it's something that has come up recently, actually,
Mm,
super recent. So I'll be vulnerable here. That's fine. So one of the courses I took when I was obtaining my MBA was at the law school here at
mhm.
UConn, and it was required for the certificate that I was receiving. So I have an advanced certificate in corporate and regulatory compliance,
Oh,
which I think is
okay.
important in our world because
Mhm.
ACGME is our regulator, right? And
Right.
we are the enforcers of their policies. And also institutionally, we enforce the policy here at the GME level. So I think that for me, when I was taking those law school courses, again, it piqued my interest again in the law, right? And something that I discovered while taking those classes is how much we lack an understanding of how the law impacts our jobs every single day. Not just our job, but like the trainees and how we interact with that, all these things.
Mhm.
And I'm grateful that I took those classes because I feel like it has made me a better manager
Right.
and I can have intellectual conversations with key stakeholders within the institution. So me and HR, we can talk the talk. I can speak the
Yes,
language to them.
exactly.
Who else? Legal, we have each other on speed dial. On
Yeah.
speed dial. You know what I'm saying? Our finance folks, same thing. You know what I mean? So I feel
Mhm.
like if anything, it prepared me, right? And it got
Yeah.
me thinking that when I went to the ECGME conference recently, there was a session that I took that they had an administrative attorney there, right, for one of their for the institution that presented. And there aren't that many of them in the field, in the
Mhm.
GME legal field, if you will, right? And I actually bumped into her on at the elevator and we were just talking. And again, we were able to have an intellectual conversation of like where the gaps are. And
Mhm.
again, that sort of sparked my interest. Like maybe this is time, like maybe I should really consider
Yeah.
because there is a gap. Like
There
I
there is. There is.
huge, yeah.
Yeah,
And
there is.
not a lot of people want it's very complicated
Mhm.
if you will. There are so many
Mhm.
nuances and um the fact that I think I was exposed to certain things early on in my career,
Mhm.
both as a manager as well as a coordinator,
Mhm.
I think gives me certain insight that really the legal team, at least here, really appreciates because I'm already thinking 20 steps ahead of like what the liabilities are, how can we can respond to something, who should we be
Yes.
including in this conversation? This time that they're like, if anything, make their job easier. It's like, oh, I know Angie's thinking
Mhm.
about it. You know
Mhm.
what I mean? I don't have to have that hard conversation with someone now. So
Right.
yeah, it was very interesting. Yeah.
Right.
So
That is good because we, being an administrator, you're working the work,
hmm
and then with you having that legal piece, you're
hmm
like, okay, well, this is the work over here, but
hmm
legally you can or cannot do this, or
yeah,
this will make it easier. I've had
yeah,
that same fight, like even with something simple as
hmm
like our affiliation agreement with schools.
yes,
Don't do the
even
regular
that. hmm
AACM and it has to go through all of this. But, legal only knows legal. They don't know like the GME or
hmm
the other part of it. So
yeah,
breaking that down to them and knowing like, okay, this is a non-compensated
yeah,
agreement. We don't have to go through this. We don't have to do that,
hmm
because all they know is what they know.
what
And
they know. Yeah.
yeah, and so we have the bigger piece of it
hmm
and then, so in both parts, not just
yeah,
legal or not just
yeah.
one, you can put it together
Mhm.
and,
Yeah.
you
And
know,
then I'm lucky in that our the attorney for medical education,
mhm,
like she has, I'm telling you, years direct experience
right.
working in GME. So she's like one of the few that I've been able to meet who kind of knows both worlds, both the GME side as well as the legal side.
Yeah.
And we teach each other all the time, and it's been very fascinating. Again, that's why my interest sparked up again, because she even tells me, I don't want to speak for her necessarily, but she even shares with me, like, there aren't that many of us we're super niche. There aren't that many of us that know both worlds well, and understand all these elements well, right? Because most, like you said, most attorneys, they only know what they know. Sometimes they get sort of like thrown into the mix and they'll solve it, I guess, but they don't fully
Mhm.
understand the impact,
Right.
how ACGME is involved, or like how this and the third. So, it's been very great to learn. And like I said, it might happen that I go back to school for law school, but we'll see. I
Mhm.
don't know. Yeah.
Well, at least you can use both of your degrees,
Yeah.
you could, that would be a very great role
hmm
for you and for the community, because you do have that background in both fields. So just helping out whatever institution that you're in, that'd
Yeah.
be huge, just
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Um,
So we'll see what the cards deal me in the future. I don't know. Never know.
I was at Omni and I heard a couple of but I think they were more, it wasn't at Omni, it was at Court. And
Yeah.
there were a couple of doctors and non-doctors, and they were
Mhm.
going, and a lot of doctors went back to get their law degree. And so
Yeah.
did a couple of administrators, and they were talking about this point right here.
Mhm.
And I kept festering over that, like, wow. I mean, I
Mhm.
could never, but but
Yeah.
they were saying the same thing, that
Mhm.
it's a hidden gem, and not a lot of people on both sectors, doctors and
Yeah.
like have this.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
having that extra piece, just that law degree is beneficial
Mhm.
long.
Yeah, I think so too. I wish it weren't so expensive, but I
Yeah.
think that I will I guess I'll end with this a little bit, that the when it comes to even something as what we may consider simple performance reviews of the residents and fellows,
Mhm.
even that has a legal impact, right? Because sometimes we don't always think about the HR piece and the
Mhm.
legal side of performance reviews. And not for anything, and I think it's fine. I'm not even against this. Our our I'm gonna say upcoming residents and fellows are a lot more savvy about what their rights are, what the ACG requirements
So true.
are. They're
So
reading,
true.
they're talking, they're
So true.
consulting.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, it's a thing, as some of them are
Yes.
becoming unionized now, so it's important that institutions and coordinators are part of that, right? Coordinators,
Mhm.
managers, administrators, that they understand what some of these
Yeah.
active conversations are, because it will impact how they do their work and how they communicate, how they write things out, what kind of advice they're giving out. Like, it's very, I think, telling about what the times are. And I think getting ahead of it is the best thing you can do. At least reading up on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? It's funny you say that, because I always tell coordinators to, even if they're not, especially if they're not in the know of the contracts, like if they're not in the whole, working the contracts and making sure they're signed, still get a copy of the contract,
Oh
read it.
yeah.
Make sure
hmm
you understand what's in their contract. And it may differ from first year, second year, third year, or what have you, but
Yeah.
know what's in the contract, in their contract. So if they ever come to you, or if they ever need anything, like, what's in their contract. You
Oh
know,
yeah.
so
hmm
you can be aware. Even our stipends for different things, like
hmm
if they want a computer, a new cell phone, or what
hmm
have you, it's in the contract. So,
Yeah.
it lists out what they can and cannot buy. So you need to
Mhm.
know these things in order to, CYA too, right?
Yeah, just in case, you
Um,
never know.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
then even with the policy, the institutional policy, know that, especially as relate to like a
Mhm.
employee, because they are,
Yeah.
the employees, they know
Mhm.
what they can and cannot do, because they're using that. Even though you
Mhm.
have your ACGME or your
Right.
GE policies,
Mhm.
sometimes they can like curveball around on the institutional.
You be shocked. You will be shocked. Yeah, trust me. Now that I'm a manager, like it's trust me, the curveballs are endless.
They keep you on your toes.
Yes, oh, they most certainly do. And it makes us question
Yeah,
everything. Honestly, like a
yeah,
process that
that's
we
true.
think that we dotted our I's and crossed our
Mhm,
T's. Now
mhm.
we have to create an exception, or we need to rewrite the whole policy, or we need to bring it up to
Yeah,
GMAC to discuss, or, it's just,
yeah,
that's why I said earlier, that's the
mhm.
excitement of the job that I happen
Yeah,
to like,
yeah.
but I can see how that could be frustrating for people because
Mhm.
it's true, you put in all this work, you thought
Yeah.
you did everything that you're supposed to, and then this comes,
Mhm.
whatever it is, but again, it's just kind of getting ahead, understanding what the current events are, what may be leading to this conversation,
Mhm.
and letting the appropriate stakeholders know that this conversation is
Right.
happening so that way they can respond appropriately as well. And kind
Yes.
of having that unified voice helps in these situations
Mhm.
because as soon as you get disjointed responses, again, being a manager, I'll give you guys some
Yeah.
insight about being
Mhm.
an institutional manager, that they will go up and around sideways to see if the answers are consistent. That has happened.
Yes. Yes.
Some of us as
Yes.
coordinators also kind of were we be put in the
Mhm.
mix as well, but it
Mhm.
happens. So it's just
It
kind of getting
does.
ahead of that. Yeah.
It does.
Mhm.
It does. So,
Yeah.
well, that's that's the name of the game, though. A lot, when
Mhm.
you're dealing with residents and the whole program, and you have
Yeah.
to be aware and you have to know. Um,
Yep.
so what do you think like is the biggest motivator for
Mhm.
your professional development, especially within
Mhm.
GME?
Ooh, that's a
What
good question.
motivates you for professional
Mhm.
development?
That's a great question. There's a couple, but I'll share one reason why I went into management in
Mhm.
this space. Poor management is what motivated me to be part of this. So and this is I think collectively. So I'm not saying this is only specific to GME. So I'm going to be very clear for many reasons that it's not just GME specific, but I think many of us understand or can what is it? I'm trying to find the word here. I'm losing my train of thought what the word is, but you can relate, I guess, to those who you've had probably your share of poor training or terrible management, micromanaging, whatever you want to call it. And I think for me, for in my experience, the whenever I would bring something up, um, advocating for myself, advocating for my colleagues or what have you, the responses would be different, but it would very much be, well, this is just the way that things are. I don't have time to deal with this. You're not the manager. Why do you care so much? I'm the boss. I'm the one with the MBA. You're not. Like I've heard it all at this point,
Mhm.
and I said, you know what? I know how to solve this problem. I'm gonna go into their shoes now and I'm gonna get the MBA. That was my response to that. So it was a little bit out of spite, if you want the
Mhm.
truth, but because I'm like, if that's the excuse that you're making,
Right.
right? Then I'm finding it hard to believe that the that these are the reasons why you cannot manage well. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? I know that there's challenges to being a manager because there are, but I think that now that I've learned the same things that they know, I'm
Mhm.
holding them accountable. And trust me, it's been very interesting conversations that we've been having with different
Yep.
managers. Yeah, about like things that they're not thinking about in general. And I'm gonna share something as an example. I've been in conversations I'm where sometimes the manager on record for the coordinator is asking them to do things that impact their ability to be a coordinator. For example, they will assign them a project, right? But in the middle of recruitment, in right smack in the middle of recruitment, right? Or like
Mhm.
stuff like that. So sometimes like what I do in those conversations, if they're consulting with me, I'll say, is it kind of like is the project super high priority that it needs to be done during recruitment, or are you willing to give them overtime or flex schedules or something, right? Because
Right.
some of the coordinators either they don't feel comfortable advocating for themselves during those situations, or they feel like they're obligated, right, to accept certain assignments kind of thing. And I
Right.
know it's a little tricky depending on where you're working and who you're working for, but I always try to remind other managers, like, remember that, imagine if this is like the busiest time of year for you. It's like for many of us managers,
Mhm.
budget season. is like we don't like it. It's terrible. And then now someone wants to add like this huge project in the middle of that. I can't focus on the thing I need to focus on, which is finance, because it's my direct responsibility,
Right.
right? So, just trying to educate people like what's really your priority. Well, what can wait? Maybe what can be assigned to someone else, or what can be divided up better, to advocate for the coordinator, because I feel for them. I used to be in that same situation. And luckily it was due to managers and supervisors and program directors who would advocate for me as well in those conversations that I, as a coordinator, was not part of, to say, hey, I know you like Anjali's work and you think she would be a great fit for this assignment, but I need her to
Right.
focus
Right.
on this thing that I need her to focus on, which is her primary responsibility. It is
So,
not this thing that you need her to do, So that's what I try to do, because I noticed the benefit to that. I benefited from that, and I try my best to insert myself in that way with the influence that I have, So that's that. So that's what motivates me, right? Just a little bit out of spite, I'll be honest, about poor management and holding them accountable. Just being
yeah.
real. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of poor management out there. I'm not even a perfect manager, just straight up. I have a lot to learn, but trust me, when someone's not a good manager, you probably have experience it yourself. It's
Yeah.
very obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
And
uh,
you want them to do right,
mhm,
because regardless, right is right and wrong is wrong. So
yeah,
if you know for a fact, NBA or not,
mhm,
that your manager is not doing what they need to do, I mean,
mhm,
you tend to not wanna listen to them, and not wanna,
yeah,
go to them because, "Oh, they're gonna tell me
mhm,
something wrong or the wrong way to do it, and
yeah,
they don't know this,"
mhm.
and that makes for a whole horrible team, working collaboration.
I agree. Yeah. And I think the other part that motivates me in the space, right? It's really the coordinator experience. We talk about the experience of the residents and fellows. We even have questions on the HGMA survey related to their experience. And I honestly feel like sometimes the coordinators are just like MIA, not considered, not thought about.
So true.
Um, no one thinks about us and what we have to go through day to day to help run these programs.
Mhm.
And also some of the like heartbreaking stories I've heard from other coordinators, like about their experiences. Doesn't matter if they're by themselves or they have a team, didn't matter. It's just like you can tell that unfortunately, despite all efforts or resources or what have you, their experiences are not good, and not everyone can just quit and go to another job, or it's not that easy.
Everybody got
So
bills.
yeah, so and I think for me the most heartfelt ones are the ones where they feel like they didn't have anyone to advocate for them,
Mm.
to speak on their behalf in some way. And although I can't help everyone, obviously, because I don't work for their institution necessarily, but I try to be impactful in other ways, and I think that inserting myself in like conversations about policies and procedures, best practices, like I
Mhm.
shared just a few minutes ago about, mentioning things during certain meetings. I've been in leadership roles where I've done the same thing, and it's important to keep talking about it.
Yeah.
You have to keep talking about it. I know it's tiring, it's a lot of work, but you
Mhm.
have to keep the conversation going,
Mhm.
because if not, trust, they will
Yeah.
forget. They, as in the ones who really do have the power to make
Right.
changes. You know what I mean? Um, so that's why, like, I don't care if I'm blue in the face. I will continue to advocate for coordinators and what they need. And I'll give even a recent example. Like, I advocated for our coordinators in our institution to have a budget line for travel to a conference. It
Mm.
was not in the budget for them
Oh,
to go.
really?
Yeah, I know. And shockingly, like you'd be surprised, that is the case in many places.
Oh,
That is the
wow.
case. Yeah, it is not budgeted for any money whatsoever for them to go to personal, like professional, like conferences, for
Yeah.
example.
Wow.
And so it was in some of the program budgets, but not all of them. And so we wanted to, myself and our new leadership team, we said, you know what, let's make it happen. Let's make it sure that all the programs, doesn't matter, there's going to be money allocated for the PD as well as the coordinator to attend whatever conference they feel is most beneficial to them, whether that be ACGME
Mhm.
or the specialty specific one. And again, the look of like joy, right? That you see from the coordinators, like, okay, I'm being thought of,
Right.
like that's
Yes.
You know, like, they care, they want me to learn, they want me to grow, you know, like that, it makes a huge difference in their experience overall. So
Mhm.
I'm sharing that on purpose because, again, I didn't have to say a word as a manager about that. Some could say I should care less, but I care too much for the well-being of the coordinator because I feel like the learning that they receive from some of these conferences really can help improve their overall experience in managing the program. So, yeah.
You know what? It's funny you say that because I do know that we are like more of I don't want to say newer program, but a newer
Mhm.
program. But the conferences, they were automatically in our
Ah,
budget.
so interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, for the PD
Mhm. The
and
coordinator? Yeah.
the coordinators. But also, if there's something that, a coordinator really wants to do or
Mhm.
another conference that they want to go
Yeah.
to, the director, she will still make a case by case point of
Mhm.
why we need to go,
Mhm.
and so, there's some coordinators that love professional development, and there's some
Mhm.
that's just fine with let me just work.
Right.
So being able to like move those either funds
Mhm.
around or
Yep.
allocate, different
Mhm.
ways, especially when behind the scenes and
Mhm.
your budget,
Yeah.
you can do that, right?
Right.
So that's one thing that I do. I always will
Mhm.
ask, and have the coordinators like, do you, I try to push them like this is what you need to
Yeah.
do. If you
Right.
want to grow, if you want to, get out there and network, go to conferences, you know,
Mhm.
speak to other people,
Mhm.
ACTME and your specialty, and
Right.
then join committees and then, pull yourself out there to make yourself seen. And so that way, then you could be like, okay, I want to advocate for this additional,
Right.
conference or
Mhm.
maybe getting this certificate, they do pay for
Yeah.
it, see tag me,
That too. Yeah, us
you
here as
know?
well.
And then like even when I was getting my other certificates, like
Mhm.
I was like, look, you don't have a lot of professional development, but this is what I want. And I
Mhm.
pleaded my case, and this is
Mhm.
why. And they
Yeah.
were, they paid for different things. But if
Mhm.
you don't know, then
Yeah.
and then if you don't have anyone backing you, I like
Mhm.
our director because uh, she's new to just even managing people, but
Yeah.
she's very reasonable. If you
Mhm.
come with, this is what I want, this is why, and lay it all out, so
Mhm.
she can see it like just from A to Z.
Mhm.
Yeah, then okay, yeah, I'll take it to like our
Right.
CMO and I'll get it approved. So I think that coordinators also have to, if they want the professional development,
Mhm.
push for it too. And then if
Yeah.
they get stopped at the door, like even like you, hey, this
Mhm.
is what I want. Like, what can I
Mhm.
do? I know you're not in my institution, but what else could I
Mhm.
do? What else could
Yeah.
I say, give them, or what have you? So that's good that you do
Mhm.
advocate for 'em. I think
Mhm.
that coordinators need all the professional development because
I
things are
agree.
always changing,
Always
always
changing.
changing.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I just wrote an article, a news article, literally.
Mhm.
I'm fine tuning it about like CME for us. We still need continued medical
Yeah.
education for us
Mhm.
because what we did last year is totally different than what we're doing this year and
I
what we
agree.
will be doing next year with
Mhm.
ACGME or with all of our systems. Thalamus is no longer,
Mhm.
just everything. So
Everything.
we
Yeah.
need to stay abreast on what is going on for our
Yeah.
residents, faculty, for the patients, because regardless, it does trickle back down to the patients, with our budget. I know a lot
Mhm.
of coordinators, they don't deal with their budget. I'm like, so how do you know what you're
How do
spending?
you know what you're spending? Yeah. I know.
And I was at Omni and think his name was John Ballister or something like
Mhm.
that. He gave a presentation on budget and his
Mhm.
tracking system. And I'm like, oh, can I get that? Like,
Right.
I want to work on it. I want to implement it to see, is this easy for us? Maybe I can share with all of the, coordinators. So
Right.
just doing little things like that will have a
Mhm.
big impact,
I
later
agree.
on.
Yeah, I agree. That's something we've talked about too. Like, we actually consider the budget that we have for the coordinators CME. But even I'll go even further than that. Something that I've spoken about with a few of my new team members is creating like a curriculum for the coordinators,
Yep.
new coordinators, those with experience, but then also as we're thinking about more globally,
Mm-hmm.
everything that we do is changing constantly, right? So kind of like we were talking about like maybe having office hours with themes, right? To discuss like maybe like new, ACGME core requirements, any updates to those, or
Mm-hmm.
anything related to like Thalamus updates or whatever the case may be, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think
Yes.
that although some of these, I'm going to say, some of these organizations do provide their own level of CME, if you will, about updates that they have. But I noticed that either due to time, resources, or whatever the case may be, they will prefer that it come from one of us. So I've even been thinking about like a newsletter, just something, right, where they can find what they need, read up on it or listen to it, or watch it. And it's just a lot of work if you want the truth. But something that my DIO and I created was
Mm-hmm.
like a timeline, like a master sheet of all of our program specialties, as well as institutional related things that we need to cover for a whole 2 years. And we're going to be creating topics on those things so that way we can address it ahead of time
Mm-hmm.
versus when it becomes a thing. So even something
Right.
as simple as like, how do I apply for a compliment increase? You would think it's the same process every year, but it is not, has not been the same process every year. It has actually changed.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
Right.
So even
Right.
the approval process, everything, right? So it's just things like that that we're trying to be ahead of the game, if you will, and
Mm-hmm.
give them credit for it.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's something that maybe our CME department won't accept it as something that it deserves credit, if you will. But it's hard because many of them, we're not a pure academic institution, so we're isolated hospital system.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that CME is treated here is different from when I was at Cornell or Yale, right? Because they don't have like a pure faculty appointment like they would at a medical school, right?
Okay. Right.
So I feel like, for example, at Yale, they had like an educator track, if I remember, like
Mm-hmm.
and so some
Mhm.
of these things would count towards that. Like
Right.
that would incentivize them, right, to
Right.
make sure they're reading up on certain things, etc. Same thing at Cornell. Similarly, right, they were, I think, on some type of track where these type of learning experiences would count towards something like that. And also, if
Mhm.
I think about the coordinator, these experiences to me should count towards like a promotion or for
Right.
higher pay.
Exactly.
Like, you know what I
Exactly.
mean? Like, so
Right.
like this conversation we're having with HR about like how best to approach this,
Right.
because I want folks to feel incentivized to attend,
Right.
spending time doing that. It's
Right.
not just what they're learning, that's one benefit. But I feel like people should get paid for learning more and
Yeah.
and like taking
Exactly.
their time to perfect their craft, if you will. So
Right.
yeah.
Right. You think
Continue.
medical professions, they do every time they, learn something or
Yeah.
or whatever, they get,
Uh-huh.
more money. But also I was thinking when you were
Mhm.
talking like about the CME for coordinators, and
Uh-huh.
maybe this is something that we could, also
Mhm.
take offline. But when you think
Yeah,
of
right.
like CME, like a CTAG,
Mhm.
right?
Yep,
They do take certain things
they do.
for a credit, right? It may
Mhm.
not be CME credit, but they
That's
still
true.
take different things. So
Mhm.
even like when I give a presentation, they will
Mhm.
still take that as a
Mhm.
credit
A
for
credit, right.
coordinators, right? So
Mhm.
when you do things, maybe it's not CME in the standard, but
Mhm.
if they're still like
Mhm.
attending a live webinar,
Mhm.
it's still counted as credit towards
Yeah,
their CME to if they're already
yeah.
certified or to get certified.
Mhm.
So, I mean, that's something that they can play with too. And
Mhm.
not only that, I know like in our institution, um, we have like different people who are
Mhm.
I don't say masters, but like are the know or the master at certain
Yeah, right.
one thing to bring it
Mhm.
back. Like we have one who is,
Mhm.
knowledgeable about new innovations, right?
Yeah.
She'll go to all the conferences, look at, demos,
Mhm.
and then she'll take it, bring it back to us with
Mhm.
anything new or at a meeting that we may
Yeah.
have monthly. So you have that one person who feels empowered, you know,
Yeah,
to
I
do
agree,
something.
yeah.
You have one
we used to call them
accreditation.
champions at Yale,
Oh,
like MedHub
champions.
champion,
Yeah,
Thalamus champion, like that kind of thing. Because
yeah.
I agree. Like, I feel like when you identify someone who's like really good at
Mhm.
something, and and then they become the subject matter expert on it, and they're bringing back
Right,
information that's useful to everyone.
right.
That's, again, I actually really like the fact that you mentioned that, because I feel like for when I worked in the legal field, there were like a couple things that I was like considered expert on. I got
Mhm.
paid extra. There was like a supplemental pay that I had on my paycheck
Yeah,
for
yeah,
that. You know what I mean? Because they benefited from
right.
me knowing this information in some way, and I'm the only
Exactly.
one that had it. So, you know what I
Right.
mean? So yeah, so
And then you got
something
to
to think
think if
about.
you're the go-to person, everybody's going to continue to go to you.
Yep,
So why not
exactly.
get paid a little bit, extra
A
for it?
little bit, yeah, exactly.
Even
Yeah.
if they're like, okay, 50 cents or 80, it
Hmm.
still kind of like adds up on top of what you're
Yeah.
doing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because a lot of institutions may not give you a whole $3, for
Yeah.
this, but it's just to incentivize, them being
Yeah.
that one person. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's actually, and
Hmm.
then maybe even having a contract for it too, like an addendum to their, um,
That's exactly how they did it when I was working in the legal field, that there was like an extra form that was
mhm,
added to my file, my personnel file,
mhm,
related to it. And it was on my same thing. It was like for 2 years, I had to recertify for this like
yeah,
benefit, if you will, to receive the pay. But
right.
for me, I don't know about you, I'm motivated by money.
I
I,
know,
I
I
love me
know,
a good
and it all
coin.
adds
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. I will
It
never
all
say no to
adds
money.
up. I
Yeah,
remember,
so
what is that,
oh,
Coming
I
to
can get
America,
paid for this extra thing? Yeah, so,
right?
yeah.
You remember Coming to America? They was like, we like the kind that jingles, but we want the kind that folds. Like, I want both of them because it's all gonna
Yep.
add up for me. I want the jingle and the
Amen.
fold.
Exactly. So, but with all that being said, I feel like we're really like trying to get through to leadership about
Right.
these conversations, because I think
Mhm.
for going back to like what motivates me with the coordinators, I think the issue that I've certainly had is the lack of understanding or education that senior leaders have about what we do and how important
Yes.
our role is. And
Yes.
like they really do, in many places
Yeah.
still, they still see us as like glorified secretaries, right?
Yes.
That's like my biggest
Yeah.
pet peeve. I'm like, no. So I've noticed over the years, right, that there has been such a large discourse about
Mhm.
it, that
Mhm.
now finally we're seeing more program managers and administrator titles.
Yes.
We're seeing
Yes.
much higher pay with some coordinators in some institutions, right? So it's getting there. Is it universal? No.
Yeah.
But I think we're finally getting there. And at the very least, it's giving, like, I know I'm going to be using a lot of information that has been shared in the Facebook group, about like pay scales and what
Mhm.
like the job
Mhm.
descriptions
Yeah.
are, etc.
Yeah.
Because I'm on a hunt right now as for
Yeah.
as much info as possible, because I'm currently advocating for our coordinators here to get different title changes and pay
Yeah.
scales, etc. Right.
Same
So it's
thing.
just, yeah, it's
Yeah.
disappointing to a degree, but I'm glad we've been making
Yeah.
some progress,
Yeah.
because yeah, it's
Yeah.
tough.
We're doing the same thing because it's like, okay, if you are so many years and under, it's this. If you're
Mhm.
above that, but without a tag me, you're that. But if you got a tag me certified, then you're that. If you have a degree, like a bachelor's or first
Yeah.
associates, maybe a bachelor's, then so we're doing the
Mhm.
same thing,
Yeah.
so because like you said, we are not, I hate the word secretaries. Yeah, we do a lot of administrative stuff, but
Yeah.
when you think about a program, there's one
Mhm.
person besides IM. There is
Mhm.
one person who is over that entire program.
Mhm.
There's
Yeah.
one person who is managing
Mhm.
residents and doctors. Oh,
Yeah.
don't get me started on if you don't have a GME department, then you
Oh,
have
yeah.
all the GME work, the CME, the
Yeah.
medical students, all of that. That is not secretary stuff. That is management.
I agree.
So,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. So I really hope that like, and again, it's been a lot of changes even since I started, like what, 8 years ago, 8, 9
mhm,
years ago now. So there's been a lot of changes. I think even in our institution, like I think they're requiring like a bachelor's now, and there's a different pay scale for it now, but
yeah,
it's tough because I feel like they don't always get it. Even when I'm speaking with leadership here, I'm like,
yeah.
okay.
But you know what?
So
And I think that's because if they're in their mind, I know this is some of the leadership that I've been speaking to about this in different institutions at that, like, they're thinking that, okay, if you're a manager, then you at least need to have a bachelor's.
Mhm.
And I'm like, true, but
Yeah.
in this particular realm, you really
Mhm.
don't need one.
Yeah.
But they're like, if we're going to pay you the money and you have
Mhm.
a manager title, then you at
Yeah.
least need a bachelor's. So
And
I
I'm
mean,
gonna add something to that too, that sometimes they require that you have a direct report, at least one.
well,
Can
and
even
then
have
that,
the manager title.
but
Yeah, that's the other thing too.
how we kind of got around that? Our
Mhm.
residents, you have 21 residents that direct
Yeah.
to you. Like,
Directly
you
report,
still have
yeah.
to manage them because you have to think about, you have to make sure that they are professional, they have their the
Mhm.
professionalism, right? When you
Yeah.
think about CCC, who really gives more information to the well, I know in our institution, we do.
Yeah.
The coordinators are like, okay, look, for professionalism, they do or don't. They didn't listen to me. They did, so we keep
Yeah.
all of that. So that's a direct report. So you have 21 direct reports up to
Mhm.
you, right? And so you do have direct reports because they have to
Mhm.
listen to you. And then if you have like medical students, you still
Mhm.
have to deal with them as well,
Mhm.
even though our hardcore proof for us was we have residents
Yeah.
that we have to.
Yeah. And I think, in someone who has written a few job descriptions already, the semantics come into play a lot,
Yeah.
so it's like, I'll give an example. So, I'm the supervisor on record for all of our learners as the
Okay.
manager of medical education, right? It's me.
Hmm.
However, because the type of role that the residents and fellows have is primarily clinical,
Hmm.
um, I don't do the performance reviews. Okay. It's their program director who does it.
Right.
Um, so, um, so one can argue that although they directly report up to me, it's really more of an indirect report because I
Hmm.
don't do their performance reviews, right? That's like one metric. Um, so, similarly, right? Like I think the semantics, especially with HR, comes into play a lot because they'll say, well, do you support, like, who's primarily responsible for like the submission of things in HGME, for example, right? According to HGME, is really the director. It's not even the coordinator, right? So
Oh, really?
director, yeah, it's really supposed
Oh,
to be the
wow.
director, right? So yeah, so it's a director. However, the coordinator does have almost, I believe, the same level of like power in web ads to submit things, right? So it'll be the milestones, that'll
Right.
be, yeah, like updating the rosters,
Right.
doing the annual update, etc.,
Maybe
except for
so.
a certain point when
Yes.
it's submission time.
Yes.
You know
That's
what I mean? When it's submission time, right? So, like, that's where the semantics come into
true.
play with HR specifically. That's what they
Yeah.
are going to like needle it down to is like, but in actuality, they're just supporting. And then that word support downgrades how much the coordinator will get paid. You know
Oh,
what I'm saying? 'Cause you see what I'm saying?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, versus manage, or versus like
Mhm.
consult with, or there's certain words that they're picking up
Yeah.
on. So if it's
Hmm.
support versus manage, as you can imagine,
Right.
support, manage, direct, strategy. You know what I mean? Like we use
Yeah.
bigger words or whatever.
Yeah.
All of a
Yeah.
sudden, you're downgraded to something else.
Oh,
So yeah, yeah, so I
that's
noticed,
true.
like, in the job descriptions, that's something that, like, I even try to be
Hmm.
careful of because 'cause I'm like, I don't wanna downgrade them
Right.
the word
Right.
support.
Right.
Or
That's true.
assist, that's the other one that comes up as well. Support, assist,
Yeah.
does on
Yeah.
behalf of, like,
Yeah. I don't like
immediately, yeah,
assist either. I don't like assist either
yeah.
because it's like you're not doing it solely. You're just, yeah, I don't like
Just
assist.
kinda sorta doing it. Yeah, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So words matter,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
just a fun little tidbit.
With us, it's like because the residents are employees of our hospital and we are, but our doctors are not,
Mhm.
that's where they come to us.
Yeah.
Um, because the doctors are like in a whole nother entity, even though they have
Right.
to write off, everything,
Mhm.
everything has to come roll through our
Mhm.
coordinators to even
Right.
get
Get
in
anything
there.
done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but you are right. So I am going to redo all of that. You're right, because
Yeah.
no, I don't want to
Mhm.
put support. I will, they do manage.
Manage, oversee,
Yeah.
like again, the words mean things. And especially even like, for example, when you're applying to a job. I'm going to share this tidbit,
That's
right?
true.
Yeah. So when you're applying
That's
to a
so
job,
true.
don't use assist or support
Yeah, I
or
never
on
did.
behalf
Yeah.
of. Be more assertive with what you do, which is not lying. That is what you do. You
No.
literally manage the onboarding process. You
Yeah.
oversee this process. You do this on the third. That is what you do. Right. And then I do add words, right? Like, so if anyone is hearing this, right, that's interested in sharing what my CV and my resume looks like, I do add on that I'm collaborating with the team, right? So it's not just me doing it, or that I'm consulting with someone else to complete it.
Yeah.
However, these action words that I'm using for myself, like I make sure that because I don't want to devalue myself. If
Right.
I don't want them to even question, but
Mm-hmm.
can she do it on her own? Because the answer is yes, I can do it on my own,
Yes.
or you
Yes.
know what I mean, or on behalf of, not on behalf, but do it on my own, or I know who I need to consult with to complete
Mm-hmm.
it if necessary, right? So, um, so for those of you who really are
Yes.
interested in like management specifically, like that's what we look a lot at, or what
Mm-hmm.
the hiring manager looks a lot at is,
Mm-hmm.
oh, if it's a support, then I need someone to
Right.
be more independent than that.
Right. Right.
So yeah,
Especially
so.
when you are trying to grow in your career, right?
Mhm,
Or you're trying to get on that next level. It's funny that you said that because
mhm,
even though I do that with me, I've never until now
mhm.
correlated that with the residents.
Oh yeah.
Because I know I make
Mhm.
sure my stuff is like, boy,
Yeah.
it's too assertive sometimes.
Mhm.
But I've never correlated that, but you're right.
Ah, yeah.
That is right. Because and actually me and there's another coordinator was she a manager, institutional? Anyway, another Jimmy professional.
Mhm. Yep.
Um, we are we are like writing our um proposal to
Oh, nice, yeah.
for ACGME, to present at
Mhm. Oh,
ACGME.
good. Yeah.
And those were some of the, and it was about like being a leader and GME,
Mhm.
just and those are
Yeah.
some of the point words or points that we brought out, not
Mhm.
just on the resume, but even for yourself when you're
Mhm.
speaking to leadership, when it's
Yeah.
how you word yourself and
Oh,
what you
yeah.
bring, at the
Mhm.
table to,
Yeah.
you know, will it minimize you or not?
Mhm.
How are you
Yeah.
looking at yourself and you want them to look at you this
Mhm.
way?
Yes.
So you have to make sure what you're saying, especially
Mhm.
when you get the seat at the table and how you're saying it,
Yeah.
um, to the stakeholders
Mhm.
will either,
Yeah.
lift you up or not at all. So yeah.
Not at all. Yeah. And even I've always been given the advice like, dress like the position that you hope to have one day, right? So that gave us the same principles, right?
Yes.
I speak in the
Yes.
way that I want to be perceived as in
Yes.
general, right? Like I want to be perceived as a senior leader or something like that. So I use
Exactly.
certain words on purpose, and not because it's not lying, because yes, I do oversee certain things. I do
You
consult to do certain things. That's
yes.
not untrue, but I make sure that I don't like use certain words to devalue what it is that I do because I don't want
Right.
anyone to question my authority, my intellect, my experience or anything like
Knowledge.
that. Because people do
Yes.
pick up on that.
Skills.
Like
Right.
I didn't think it was true until it was true, until someone it's like, oh, like you could see the looks on their faces like,
Yeah.
like you're a manager, but you're saying you assist with this. What does that even mean? Like, doesn't even add up,
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
and even when I
Yeah.
was a coordinator, same thing. Like, whenever I did have a seat at the table,
Mhm.
luckily I had a team that was supportive of my career choices and knew what I was wanting to do. So trust me, I had a voice. I'm very grateful for that.
Mhm.
And they even made sure to not use certain words to describe the things that I did,
Mhm.
right? Because they didn't want to minimize my role whatsoever. It's like they will literally say like, "Oh, Anjali, oh yeah, she runs the entire onboarding for our
Right.
program."
Right.
The chiefs and
Right.
the PDs, they were like, we don't do anything with that. Anjali tells
Right.
us what to do.
Right.
You know
Right.
what I mean?
Because
Yeah.
you
So you
never
need to
want
go
to
to
devalue
her.
yourself. You just don't
Yeah.
want to do that.
Yeah. But then I know for a fact that there's other leaders that they don't feel comfortable doing that because all they see you as is you're just a coordinator or like you're just assisting me doing this, even though they
Mhm.
didn't do anything
Yes.
really to help that process. They don't, but they
Yes.
want to get the credit for it somehow, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate because
Mhm.
it really makes you
Mhm.
feel very small in that situation. It really
Right.
does.
Especially when you put all that time and effort and energy into it and you're like,
and you know how much you did, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that's I think that's the part that breaks my heart, because I know that there are coordinators who go home every day and they feel like, man, like I feel super small, and I know how much work I put
yeah.
into something. I know how much I advocated for my residents or fellows. I
Mhm.
know how much I saved my PDs, you know what, in certain situations, etc. And to be minimized like that,
Yeah, yeah,
that
that's
wouldn't
so
motivate me to
true.
go into work every day. I can tell you that much. Yeah, it wouldn't. It wouldn't.
You know, I
Yeah.
love what you said about dressing the part too, because I always try to preach that because like
Mhm.
if you want to grow in your career or if you want to, I know some coordinators, they want to go into HR, like director of HR
Mhm.
or, somehow, get into the C-suite.
Right.
So when you said about dressing the part,
Mhm.
just because sometimes you may right now sit behind the desk, you know what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah.
At work, you still have to walk around the hospital. You still have to go into
Mhm.
meetings. You still have to be around certain people. So dressing the part, I feel like is essential because they're going to see you how you present yourself, you
They
know?
do.
And
Yeah.
a lot of people, I shouldn't say a lot of people, like a lot of coordinators, they don't realize that. Like when you
Mhm.
go into like your GMAT,
Mhm.
okay, you're going in with, let's just say, I've known some that will have slacks or they will have the scrubs and the logo
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know
shirt.
people do
And
that.
then
Yeah.
I'm like, but you're not clinical, you're not a resident, you're not
Mhm.
like, what are we doing here? Like
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
but yet you want to climb the ladder.
I'm very big on personal branding.
Mm-hmm.
Huge on that. I know I've been to a few events at school, as well as other events where that was emphasized. And
Mm-hmm.
even my mother, like she would always teach me, like, you gotta smell good, you gotta look good, you gotta look presentable, you know what I mean? And
Yes,
so it's like every
yes.
day is church, is kind of how she put it, right? Like you gotta dress
Okay.
so yeah.
Every day is
You know,
church.
so yeah, every day's church, you know what I mean? So you
Yeah.
put your Sunday best, right? And I that was like brand true for me. Like
Yeah.
even if you see pictures of me when I'm younger, it would be like the cold of winter, snowing outside here in Connecticut. I'll be wearing my high heels, my skirt, my blazer, etc. Because to me, I felt like that set me apart, and that helped put more added value to myself, like that validated my own self. And so with that being said, as an adult now and working in I guess you could say corporate America in the hospital system, for me, because of the career that I'm trying to achieve for myself,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
I know that I can't just be looking or talking or whatever certain way. Now I want to be
Exactly.
careful with what I'm saying because I know what I look like. Okay. I am not, I'm not
Right.
even any right. So without saying too much. So I think for
Mhm.
me, I have to constantly think about being true to myself
Exactly.
and how to survive in
Mhm.
the corporate
Yes,
landscape,
yes.
So I
Mhm.
think, again, I think for me, I'm grateful, truly humbled that I work for an organization that celebrates
Yes.
diversity
Mhm.
from everyone
True.
from different walks of life. You can be yourself, you be your true
Yeah.
authentic self and come to work that way. While still being professional, right? Like
Exactly.
and for me, professional is like looking presentable. I'm not wearing heels every day. Let me be very clear about that. I'm not wearing heels every day. I'm not always wearing makeup every day. I even wear
Mhm.
super light makeup, right? It's not like I have a full face of makeup or anything like that. So I don't necessarily subscribe to like looking all dolled up all the time. If that's what you
Right.
want to do, that's fine. But for me, what best is for me is like what something I feel comfortable in, where I can
Mhm.
be taken seriously,
Right.
where I'm not gonna feel invisible in the room or anything like that.
Mhm.
And that again, because of the type of role that I feel and look like I have some level of authority. You
Right.
know what I mean? Because all of that, trust me, I mean, you see
Mhm.
it, maybe because I worked in the legal field, I see it
I had a different thought.
most often. Everyone is stuffy. Mind you, I'm relaxed in how I dress now, right? But imagine you're wearing a black dress, pumps, full face of makeup. Like that's what I was used to in the legal field. Like we were always dressed up. So
Right.
because we have to be ready for court and everything like that. And even that has changed, right? That you're not always wearing black, blue, or gray. Now
Right.
you're wearing some pink
Right.
suits and like all the things,
Right.
and I'm loving it. Yeah.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So that
Yes.
has changed as well. But but I say that it's like, be your true self, be
Mhm.
comfortable in what you wear, whatever that may be. and this goes for men, women, he, she,
Mhm.
they, doesn't matter, right?
Right,
Like it's whatever you feel comfortable in.
right.
You know what I'm saying? And bring that. And I feel like people notice that confidence more than anything else.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? And I feel like so long as you're confident in what you're wearing,
Right.
and how you present yourself, I think that shows it shows. It shows, and I think people notice you. But yeah, but I know for me, like constantly branding or rebranding yourself is a necessary thing when you're climbing up the ladder.
Yes.
And if you read about your favorite leaders, they have to do the exact same thing. Matter of fact, they have an entire team about their image alone. So,
Oh,
so many people that you admire, that's what it is. That is part of the game. So,
hmm.
it's something to think about. Yeah. Mhm.
Um, I was about to say something and I just lost my train of thought. But yes,
Okay.
I'm totally the same way. I have friends who they do still wear the navy blue and the black and make sure they have the blazer.
Mhm,
Um, and I'm always a wild card. Like when
mhm.
I gave a presentation at Omni, I had on a green suit, but it was still
Yay.
like, okay, listen, yeah.
Yeah.
But, because that's just me, I don't,
Mhm.
I like to spice it up. Like you said, be true to
Yeah,
yourself,
I'm
and
same. Yeah.
that's me. I will
Mhm,
always be professional dressed with a little bit of
mhm.
spice.
Yeah, funny you should, so
Spice.
this popped into my head just now. I was invited by my graduate school to like an event or whatever, like an award ceremony.
Uh-huh.
The dress code set to dress, professional, right? Like business attire, right?
Mhm.
Now, or I forget what it was, but just to be professional, right? But
Right.
I didn't get the memo that it was supposed to be the blue, gray, black combo. I didn't know. So I come in with like this beautiful floral, still professional floral dress. I stood out like a sore thumb because quite literally everyone was in blue, black, or gray. I was the only one. However, because I stood out, not in a bad way, because I owned it. I didn't care.
Mhm.
I'm gonna be me. So like I owned
Mhm.
it, and the amount of people that I networked with and we talked about, and they loved the dress, like, oh, you look so beautiful in the
Mhm.
dress. Like I wish I would have remembered to put on some color today. I'm like, yeah, why be so drab? I mean, you gotta spice it up. You know what I mean? So I'm glad I made that error, if you will, right? Because if
Right,
anything, that sparked
right,
several conversations, and I learned. I trust me, I networked with a lot of people that evening because of it. So yeah.
right, right,
So
right. I'm with you. I'm with you. You gotta be comfortable. You gotta be yourself.
Mhm,
Going back to what you said, how your mother was saying, it's church.
mhm.
My mother would call it
Yeah.
showtime. My mother, okay,
Oh, there you go.
showtime. I think we
Yeah,
all, have like what our mother would call it. It would be like
yeah,
showtime. So me and my sister, like she's just this big whatever, whatever.
uh-huh.
And so she was like, okay, it's showtime. So I'm like, oh, okay, I know what that is. So yeah,
Yeah,
we call it showtime. It's like, okay,
yeah,
showtime, you gotta get,
showtime.
go and just,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. I know. Yeah, like I know I love my mom because she's very big on like appearances or whatever, probably more than I would ever be. Like my sister, my brother, like we don't care as much
Mhm.
per se, but because my mom likes to be more prim and proper about things
Yeah.
versus my siblings and we like to be more individualistic. However, I those gems definitely stay with me because again, like I'll give you another example. I was dressing how I was dressed, right? Like again, in the role that I felt like I want to be one day, very professional looking, yada yada. Still myself though, like I was wearing my pops of color and everything. And I had to go through a certain way or like path for me to get to certain offices. And
Mhm.
long story short, there was a gentleman who stopped me. He's like, "Can I ask you a question?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I see you walking through here often because I'm sure you're going to a certain area of the hospital. Um, what position do you have? Because all of us here, we all think that you're like one of the most senior people in the hospital because of the way you present yourself, how you're walking, how you say hello to us every single day, all these things. Like we're thinking you must be important. And so far, every person that you walk by, they know you, right? They'll say hello, like, hi, Angely, like, hi, this and the third. And I'm like, oh, I didn't say I was just a coordinator. I didn't say all
Mhm.
that, right? I'm a coordinator for this program. I manage this and the third, It's like, oh, wow. It's like, I really thought that you were more senior than that, but you know what? It's okay because we thought
Mhm.
you were, right? And like, and
Mhm.
you're going to make it very far with like how you're doing things. I'm like, yeah, I appreciate that. I'm observant. I noticed that the ones who were senior leadership, that was how they represented themselves. And I would ask them straight up, like, it's like, is this like how it is?
Yep.
And they're like, yeah, I mean, this is what's
Yep.
not required, but there's a certain decorum that we follow,
It is.
and are we casual some days? Absolutely. Do I come into work
Mhm.
into jeans and a little sweater? Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. But when I have important meetings, so I'm going to be walking around the
Exactly.
hospital, brushing up on
Exactly.
folks, different shoulders or whatever, there's a certain way that I dress, and that's
Mhm.
just what it is. That's the corporate culture. And
Right.
not everyone subscribes to that, and that's fine, right? But
Yeah.
again, like this is something they have to be mindful of. Politics, decorum,
Yes.
your branding, all of that matters as you're
Yeah.
climbing up, as you're
Yeah.
climbing up. So
But I think the people who know that, this is just
mhm,
my perception
yeah.
that what I see when I look and I
Mhm,
listen. The people who know that though, they get it and they do it and they grow. But the
mhm,
people who really don't know are like, I'm not doing all of that. I want that
yeah.
job, but I'm not doing all of that. They
Mhm.
sit right where they are.
I mean, you're not wrong. You're not
So,
wrong.
so,
Yeah.
and I try to so when I mentor a lot
Mhm,
of, coordinators, and I'm gonna say not even in the hospital, not even in healthcare, but outside
yeah.
of healthcare too.
Yeah.
That's my number one thing that I always preach. How you present yourself is how you will be seen. So
Oh
if you
yeah.
want to be
Mhm,
seen or as a director, you need to dress as a director because
mhm,
once you get there, you have to dress that way.
mhm.
You
Yeah,
can't
you're
come
not
in,
yeah. Uh-huh.
you can't come in
And
like,
they all again, and I feel like again for especially for the ones, it's so interesting because I've met several like coordinators, managers, administrators who do want to climb up.
mhm,
And I can admit for even for myself, so just in case I'll share this about myself. I find it challenging the political stuff and the decorum stuff.
yeah,
It's not natural to me. Honestly, I have to work hard for me to understand it. And I still don't always get it right. And so, I feel that when I mentor coordinators and managers, etc., like I always say, you have to really decide if this is really what you want
yep,
because unfortunately, I at least not right now, I don't foresee the culture of how that works changing anytime soon. It could be, it's making small changes, yes. Whereas, I think even 10 years ago, whew, if you did not have an MBA or a certain title or whatever, and a
exactly,
certain alphabet after
exactly,
your name, they wouldn't even accept you in the
yeah,
circle. Now, not as much, right? But like,
yeah,
but that's changing a little bit. But I always say to just be mindful of like, I get what you're trying to do, but
mhm,
are you willing to make some changes within yourself to adapt to that environment.
right,
Because if you're not, I don't know if you will be
right,
happy in that role. Because I'm
right,
again going back to the experience, like you have to be happy. And there may be a place where, or an institution or hospital system where you don't need to subscribe to that political nonsense, right? The
yeah,
decorum stuff, and you'll be happy. And that's great. Good for you. I'm glad that you found that. But in most places, that is what it is. It doesn't matter what hospital system you're at, that is how it is, right? And it's
yeah,
just some people could say it's disappointing because it is kind of
yeah,
disappointing, but but that's just what it is, and you learn from it too, like I've been learning from a lot of people in these circles, about how to build relationships, how to network differently than how I was networking before. Very different how I
yeah.
network now versus
It's a
before.
whole nother
Um,
level.
Whole nother level.
It
Well,
is.
even like what they like to do, like golf. I don't golf, but I'm gonna learn how to golf. You know, what I mean? Who golfs? But
I
I'm learning how to golf.
yeah.
Curly hair and all, I'm gonna golf. Yeah, so it's stuff like that that like even like understanding
Yeah,
that. But again, not because I'm gonna be doing it every day, because I'm not. I might love it. Who
right,
knows? But
right.
it's like again, I'm gonna be in the circle, you know what I mean? Like if
Yeah,
at all, right? Like it's
yeah,
just important. And you do learn things from them.
you
Even if I
do.
never
Yeah.
even want to aspire to be them ever in my life. You never
Yeah.
know. But it's so interesting some of the things that you learn from them. Like even I was at the dog park, a retired a pediatrician through conversation, I found out that's what he did, right? And he found out what I did through conversation. And, he was throwing gems at me. You know what I'm saying? Just for walking the dog, going to like
Mhm.
some like really ritzy private like dog park because I found it on Yelp, right? But I learned a lot from him. It was
Mhm.
a great conversation, and he ended it with like I'm gonna say typical doctor sometimes, like, you're young, don't forget about your health. Like, please be healthy. I'm like, oh, I'll try. But whatever that means, yeah. But
Right,
but it's similarly, right? Just like being in these other circles, like you do learn things. And I feel like I've learned how to be a better professional because of some
right,
of these conversations. I
exactly.
think some of them are willing to help and give advice,
Yeah,
kind of stroke their ego a little bit too. It's like, oh, you want to learn more about what I think or do? I would love to tell you all about it. I'm like, go for it. Talk away.
right,
Love to learn.
right.
Yeah.
Because you can
Yeah.
always, whether you agree or disagree, you can always learn something from conversations. You don't
Yeah.
always have to agree with what they're saying.
Yeah. And also, I'm going to put this tidbit, something hard lesson that I learned from undergrad. No, in undergrad, I struggled because it was a homogenous institution. So if you know anything about Providence College, it is predominantly a all white school. It is,
Mhm.
right? They've gotten better, but it is, right? And
Uh-huh,
so I struggled.
uh-huh.
And one way I survived that environment was community. The few
Mhm.
of us that were there, people of color, we just bonded together. Like, and
Okay.
it's fine. I'm still friends
Mhm.
with them till this day, with
Good.
some of them. However, right, almost to my detriment, that's not real world.
Yeah, that's true.
And so as you climb up,
Hmm.
especially if you are a person of color,
Hmm.
it gets real lonely up here sometimes. And then even more as you climb even higher than that.
That's so true.
Um, and so I had to learn how to survive in this environment as well, being the only one.
Hmm.
So, and not always having a corner, right? And I am very grateful for the mentors that I've been able to gain this
Yeah.
experience, both here at the institution as well as outside of it.
Hmm. Hmm.
Who, I've been in confidence sharing with them some of my experiences. And again, that has helped me to, when I talk about politics, that's part of it as well,
Hmm.
being
Exactly.
a person of color in this space.
Yes.
And I feel like it's worthwhile talking about it because the coordinator space is very diverse, like coming from very different walks of life,
Yes.
different races, ethnicities, etc. And many of them will want to grow in the career, in this
Hmm.
particular career path, and that's something that I feel like is not talked about enough.
Hmm.
If you want the
Yes.
truth, and many of the leaders that I've met, almost all of my both of my GME former managers and GME have been women of color. You know
Mm.
what I mean? So, some of the ACGME, just per chance, many of the ACGME sessions that I've taken, many of the speakers were women of color in
Okay.
management. It was just maybe I got lucky, I don't know, but again, many of them shared their experiences, some of their personal experiences about what it has been like being a leader in
Mhm.
GME. And I think for many of them, it's a struggle. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very much a struggle. And then you add the piece that you are a person of color, makes it even harder. You know what
Right.
I mean? It makes it even harder because sometimes, like, I'll be honest with this, I'm not taken seriously because of the way I look. I know that for a
Yes.
fact,
Yes.
even when I was a coordinator, but even much more now as a leader, right? So
Right.
it can be that way, but it's a reality.
It
And
is.
again, going back to the political and decorum stuff, like I've had to learn a few things,
Yeah.
but it's okay, it's fine. Like
Yes.
this is a personal choice that I've made to be in this career path. And I have to kind of figure my way around a little bit, but
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
it's a reality, because I'm not
Right.
going to paint it as fun all the time because it isn't. So.
Right. Well, and you got to think, most leaders are men, and men really don't want to listen to females anyway. But then you add on, the second piece,
Mhm.
like, I really don't want to listen to you,
Yeah.
even though at the end of the day, what I'm saying is correct. You
Mhm.
will have to do it anyway.
Yeah.
And or not.
Or not. Yeah.
But that's on you.
Mhm.
But these are the facts. So yeah,
Yeah.
like, okay, you're a woman. You're a
Mhm.
woman of color. I don't want to listen.
Yeah.
I don't want
Right.
to hear anything you have to say. And a lot of that, is getting better. But of course,
Mhm.
we still have a long way to go. But
We do.
Um, I love my entity that I work in because at one point in time, our C-suite was all females.
Oh, interesting. That's so
Yep.
cool. Yeah.
Yes. And then once our CEO left, we had a new one. Well, he's a man, but
Yeah.
he is phenomenal. I
Oh,
love our
great.
new
Yeah.
CEO. And then, he was all about diversity. So
Good.
and
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I see every color of the
Mhm.
rainbow, which is really, really nice.
Yeah, good.
So that's why I love the NC that I'm in. And then with our faculty, they
Mhm.
really listen to me and they really like, okay, well, what she says goes, like just period
Mhm.
point blank.
Right.
When I was in institutions that were like, okay, that's what ACGME says, so I'm only doing it because ACGME says, not because you told. I'm like, okay, well, as long as we do it, it doesn't matter.
Well,
It
right,
doesn't make a
exactly. As
difference to
long as you
me, as
do
long as
it.
it's done. Like, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, them
Mhm.
letting me know that, oh, I'm only
Yeah.
doing it because of this, not because of you. Okay,
Mhm. Okay. Sure.
that's what
Yeah.
we're gonna do. So yeah, so totally,
Yeah.
totally
Yeah.
understand, totally agree. And I mean, that is like a special podcast.
No, I feel so too. Yeah.
That's
A
like
whole
a
other
special
topic.
that
Yeah.
which I just may do that because it could be like me, you, and two other
Yeah.
professionals that I know. We should do
Well,
that.
yeah, I would be more than happy to join that conversation. Yeah, because
Yeah,
it's not spoken about enough. It
yeah,
is not spoken about
yeah,
enough.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
Mhm.
I'll have to get with you and we'll have to
Mhm.
have the books
Yeah.
and make sure we get that
Mhm.
on like very, very
Yeah.
soon.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Um,
very, very
um,
soon. Okay. So we have to wrap it up because I know I
yes,
have
ma'am.
another meeting coming.
Mhm.
So, one last thing before we wrap up. What advice
Mhm.
would you give the GME community when it comes to like growth for
Mhm.
themselves, their professional growth, their personal growth,
Mhm.
professional development? What if you give one piece of advice, what would it be?
Ooh, one.
Right,
Yeah,
I
I know
know.
it's hard. Yeah. Do what excites you,
Mhm.
and that will be your motivator. Um, I started the conversation with what I geek out about, if you will. And I leaned into that, and that's what led me to my position and my situation right now. Um, so if for you it's building curriculums or using technology in GME, or writing or whatever sparks your interest, whatever that may be, lean into it. And you could, I think, beautiful outcomes come out of that when something you're truly passionate about uh, bleeds into what you do professionally. Um, and I've noticed too in different conferences that I've attended, the coordinators who, for example, they love like they're like, I don't know, like they've been to like Harry Potter conventions or something, and they sort of like bleed that into like their topic, or they use that to like build like a new onboarding process or something. You know what I mean? Like it's so interesting just learning from them, but also looking at the sparkle in their eyes about something that they're very passionate about, and that kind of joy is what I want to see across the board for all the coordinators, like it doesn't have to be super miserable because I know it could be hard. Like being a
Right.
coordinator is hard. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna lie about that. So it
Yeah.
can be very stressful. So like if it's something that you're really passionate about,
Mhm.
really excited about, lean into that in your role as a coordinator, bleed it into what you do every day.
Yes.
And we will also anyone else working with you will see that same level of
Yeah.
excitement and want to be part of that as well and support you. So
That's good. That's good advice. I
yeah.
know that's what gets me through the day. I love policies and procedures and,
Mhm.
building, up other people.
Mhm.
And that's what I lean into, to ensure that, okay, here's the policy, not just like for residents and faculty, but
Mhm.
for us.
Right.
Like I want to, everybody else has their piece, but we
Mhm.
don't have our piece. So we
Right.
need
Yeah.
something. We need our professionalism. We need our policies to work for us. We need,
Mhm.
we need,
Mhm.
no one's thinking about us.
Right.
So I like to be like, you know what, I'm gonna think about us. So you're
Right.
right, and that's my passion, and that's what I
Yeah.
love to do. So
Mhm.
you are so right about that. And I think in doing that, you enjoy your job a lot better.
A
You
lot
enjoy
better.
it,
Yeah.
and all the disheartening things, the stress that you have to go through, it makes it just a little bit better to
Yeah.
endure because of
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that would be my advice.
I like that. I like that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today on GME Admin Insights. I am so glad you were able to come on. But if
Mhm.
listeners, if they wanted to contact you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great choice. You can always add me or send me a DM. I do look at my messages. Also I can share my work email. I don't know if I shout it out here or I can send it, but Angely, so Angely dot Martinez, Martinez at hhchealth.org. I'll make sure Natasha has it.
Yes, I
Happy
will
to
put it in the
share. Yeah.
description box as well.
Yeah. Happy to collaborate or, talk
Mhm,
more. Um,
mhm.
or learn from each other. So really
Yes.
glad you joined.
Networking,
More networking.
collaborating. Yeah,
It
I
never
love
ends.
it. I
Yeah.
love
So
it. So community, today we have been speaking with Angely Martinez, a leader in her own right, growing along the way and making strides, not just for her, but for all of us. Reach out to her on LinkedIn. I'll have her email in the description box. If you want to connect with her, if you have questions for her, I will make sure it's all there, but please reach out to her for anything that you need. And with that, we conclude another episode of GME Admin Insights. But remember that your dedication keeps the gears of GME turning and your growth matters. So until next time, community, we are out.
I think I found her. She's